Hello, online English 1301 classes at Dallas College. This is Professor Wheeler coming to you with a brief video lecture explaining some things about the Ta-Nehisi Coates essay that I asked you to read the first 10 pages of. So if you don't have that pulled up, please do get it beside you because there's some things I want to point out that will help you understand the differences between an argument to inform and an argument to persuade. Okay. Now, as I told you, we spent the first 4 weeks of this class talking about the foundations for any paper. Now, let's go over those again briefly, okay? First of all, you need a hook. A hook is something that engages your reader and makes them want to read more, right? Now, there are 4 different types of hooks, and if you've been in this class at all, you should have this probably tattooed on the inside of your eyelids, right? First, you can start with either a question, second, a quote, third, a statistic, easy for me to say, or an anecdote. Now, in my face-to-face classes, I had one person confess that they were not entirely sure what an anecdote was, so I want to explain that to you. An anecdote is just a brief little story of your own choosing. It doesn't go on for pages. It doesn't go on for paragraphs. It's a line or two that is designed to help grab, again, your reader's interest. As I have been pounding into everyone's head, you are never writing for just yourself. You are writing for an audience. In this case, the audience is largely me. Sometimes it will be from your fellow students. If you're engaged in the discussion boards, you know that you get some good feedback from fellow students as well. But primarily your audience is me. So you want to follow my expectations. Now, before we get into the essay itself, I do want to go over a few points with you because I keep seeing these errors in everyone's papers, okay? First, formatting. I don't know what to tell you about formatting other than to follow the directions. I've said it to literally everyone in this class on multiple occasions. If you are confused about the way your paper should look on paper, then go to content, go to that, the course documents section. There you will find a link that says MLA formatting. Go to that link, click it, scroll all the way down to the bottom of the link, and you will see an example of a perfectly formatted first page in MLA style. By the way, if no one has ever told you, MLA stands for Modern Language Association, and it is the governing body who decides what everyone's papers should look like, from undergraduates to PhDs and even in the professional field, okay? Think of it as kind of like your driver's license handbook, right? If we don't all obey the same rules of the road, then there can be accidents. Well, okay, maybe there won't be anything as serious as not an accident when formatting your paper, but it will cost you points and it does cause confusion. So if you think I'm a stickler about this, yep, you're right, I am. I'm a stickler about this because I don't want you coming out of my class and being given your sort of driver's license to go on to the next section of your college career. And if you don't know this, it's going to be hard on you. Let's just say that, okay? So please learn to format. Now, this paper that you are doing is different from our literacy narratives in that first, you are not saying the word I, you are taking an academic distance, okay? You set yourself back a little bit from it. There is no slang in these papers, okay? It is, for example, child, not kid. Do not use contractions in academic writing. It's do not, not don't, will not won't. I'm sure you can figure out the rest, okay? So those are some basic rules. Oh, also you spell out numerals unless they are years for the most part. So those are some things to keep in mind, okay? This paper also requires in-text citations as well as a works cited page. There is a PowerPoint in course PowerPoints for you to look at. And unfortunately, this is just a matter of learning how to do it. There's not a fun way, but it's not especially hard. Once you get the rules down, you will be good to go. All right. So This paper is requiring outside sources, as I said. However, for this paper, I only expect you to find internet sources. So that's what this PowerPoint and MLA is about. So when you're getting confused or you can't remember, go back and look at that PowerPoint that is titled In-Text Citations and Works Cited Page, okay? Following directions, that's all there is to it. All right, now moving on to Ta-Nehisi Coates' very influential and consequential essay published in 2015 called The Case for Reparations. Now, I want you to consider how Coates begins his essay. There are 3 quotes, right? Look at your paper. The first one is from the Bible. The second is from an English philosopher named John Locke. And the third is an anonymous quote from a former slave. Why does Ta-Nehisi Coates choose to begin his essay this way? Well, if you've read far enough along, you know that what Coates is calling for is not any kind of cash payment to African Americans who have been systematically abused by the system. What he is calling for is an acknowledgement of how society has deliberately structured certain things that we all need to be less eligible if you are Black. Now, let's get back to those quotes that I was talking about. First, Coates quotes, say that 3 times fast, the Bible first. Why does he quote the Bible? Because we are ostensibly founded as a Christian nation, right? So there's the myth of a Christian nation. And please, when I say myth, I mean this in the academic sense of myth. It does not mean it's not true. It is just a story that we tell ourselves, okay? The second, from philosopher John Locke, he was writing in the late 1600s to about the early 1700s to the early 1800s. Whew, that would have been a long life, huh? Anyway, so John Locke was an Enlightenment philosopher. What does Enlightenment entail? Well, the Enlightenment philosophical tradition purported that all things unknowable were ultimately knowable if you thought about them long enough and did enough research on it. So in the past, before Enlightenment theory, most natural phenomena and other unexplainable parts of life were attributed to gods or a god, right? So Enlightenment says that there is nothing that is ultimately unknowable. As humans, we can figure it out. I'm not saying that's true. I'm just saying that is the myth of the Enlightenment, okay? The last quote, that from an anonymous slave, has weight too. Because all men are created equal? No, except some, right? The Bible says, love thy neighbor. Well, you don't want that neighbor to be too close. Yes? And the third quote from an anonymous slave is a real person that has been affected by the adoption of these myths. So, Coates puts into the reader's mind, reminds us that this is what we say we are. The reality, pretty different. Don't look at my horrible nails. All right. So, as Coates launches into his narrative to begin with, he tells the story of a man named Clyde Ross. This, my friends, is pathos, right? If you listen to my other lectures or you've done your own reading, you probably know, even if you haven't done that, what moves people is a human connection, right? It's easy to dismiss people when they're a large anonymous group. That's just how humans are. But when it's a real person that's affected and you see the effects of these policies that have been in place for a long, long time, then you begin to realize that if we are to keep saying we are these things, then we need to prove that we are. Now, Mr. Clyde Davis has probably died by now. Ta-Nehisi Coates' article, The Case for Reparations, was published in 2019 when Mr. Ross was 90 years old. However, think how not far removed in time we are to the systematic oppression of a good percentage of our people, a large percentage, right? So, Mr. Coates was the grandchild of former enslaved people. He himself suffered mightily under Jim Crow laws. If you don't know what Jim Crow laws are, it's basically the doctrine of separate but equal. And that was kind of the compromise that came about after Black people got the vote, even though there was lots of suppression for that, poll taxes, other ways of preventing people from voting, right? So these kinds of things are going on right up until the Civil Rights Movement, when, let's see, how old would Mr. Ross have been then? Probably in his late 30s or early 40s, yes? Maybe I'm off. My math is not bad, but it had been, my math is bad. But it had been a considerable amount of time, yet Mr. Ross is still alive in 2015, still suffering many of the ramifications of that kind of lifelong suppression of his God-given and American rights. This is what Ta-Nehisi Coates wants you to see. So I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself. This is a complete persuasive argument. It does incorporate elements of an argument to inform, right? You still have to have ethos. If you look at Ta-Nehisi Coates' resume, he is was the editor-in-chief of The Atlantic, which is a very respected publication. He has been a professor. He has written for movies and television. He's a good writer and has done much work in the civil rights field. So his credentials are there, right? He also calls upon the ethos of our nation through the use of those quotes that work in two ways: ethos, pathos. And then we have those things going for us. We know what Coates is pointing out to us because he is so good at backing his pathos with logos, with facts. He doesn't just say African Americans have been oppressed for 250 years and we demand reparations, and there's no evidence other than what we basically know about slavery, about Jim Crow, and about the civil rights movement. And let me tell you, most people don't know much about those. He's saying that's not enough. He's saying that if we are to continue, we have to change. And the reparations come about in the form of acknowledgement that these things have happened. That's the first step. If you've read far enough, you probably got to the part where he likens it being like an alcoholic. I'm sorry, this was in the Bill Moyers video. He says, just like being an alcoholic, you have to admit that you have a problem first before anything can change. So too must America change. It's not a matter of being colorblind. It's a matter of understanding how this inequality in our system continues to put African Americans behind Anglo Americans. The fact that they have had homes longer, have gotten loans longer, have gotten into better, more prestigious schools. There has not been enough time since the civil rights era to rectify these wrongs, and to pretend that we have is ridiculous, right? That's what Coates is arguing. Whether you agree or not is up to you. However, he is trying to persuade you. He is not giving you just the digestible information in small chunks that comprised your argument to inform, right? He is getting you to say, here's all my data, here's all my personal stories, real people, real data, come at me, right? So what's also different between arguments to inform and arguments to persuade? Well, you need to go back and review that PowerPoint if you don't know yet, because an important part of arguing to persuade is that you acknowledge that there's another point of view, that's your counter argument, and then you have to have a rebuttal, correct? So you have to have a counter argument to show that you are aware of what the other side is saying. That's important. You can't argue that your point of view is right unless you are familiar with what they are saying and can prove them wrong through the power of your rhetoric. That's your speech. So that's how this argument is different. I hope that's helped a little bit. If you have further questions, please feel free to ask me. Remember that this paper does require in-text citations and a works cited page. I saw far too many argument to inform that had neither. That, my friends, is not a passing paper. Because if you do not cite your work, you know what that's called? Plagiarism. Plagiarism. It does not matter if you have a works cited page. You have to cite any words that are not yours in the text of your paper. There are some other terms in this essay, going back to the quotes for a moment, that you should probably know. I'm going to let you look them up. One is called the social covenant. One is called kleptocracy. And if you don't know much about Jim Crow laws, I encourage you to learn a little bit more other than the doctrine of separate but equal. Not because this is not a literature class, obviously, although I would love for it to be. In some ways, I love teaching writing as well. But you do have to learn how to do these things and do them correctly. So if I get to sneak in some great essays in there, that's all the better. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you find your own writing process useful to your own writing process, I should say. But remember, you have the foundations: hook, thesis, body paragraphs with support and in-text citations. When you come to the end of your paper, for the love of God, stop saying in conclusion. This is not a good way to elevate your writing, okay? It's a very high school way, and that's fine. You were learning at the time, but now your skill set needs to be improved. And the way that you conclude any paper, any academic paper in college, is a return to your hook. So there's a little something to remind us, right? So if you, I don't suspect any of you read all 60 pages of this wonderful essay, but if you had, he will return to Clyde Ross. He will restate his thesis, and it'll just conclude there nicely. 3 or 4 sentences, that's it. Now, one more thing, I've seen a lot of you, the ones who have actually tried a works cited page, yay for trying. Most of them are still not correct. Works cited belongs on its own page, separate from all the other works, but continues your numbering, your last name and page number on every page. The works cited is centered. All of your entries of this, they're only going to be 3 or 4, so it's not like you're going to need to use a bibliography tool. Please don't. It's really easy, and you'll learn it. Okay, so alphabetical, hanging left indent. That means when you see that you're coming to the end of that line and the text is going to self-wrap, don't let it do that. Just hit the return key, and that will take it to the next line, and then you tab in once. The reason that we insist on this is that if we are going back to check your sources, it's very easy on the eye line to see all of those alphabetized entries without having the extracurricular information in the way. So please do that for me. I will go back randomly and check your sources. Am I going to check every single source? I can't. I don't have time to do that. But if I see a one or two that I'm checking and you're being honest, then I'm going to hope that the rest is honest as well. Please be aware that these are run through Turnitin. So if a good deal comes up bogus, I'm not gonna pass that paper. So don't do it. I am very, very good at detecting plagiarism, and the plagiarism detecting tools are very good as well. AI, don't do it. I'll find it. I will. Also, we are going to be learning some ethical ways to use AI because it is a good and useful tool. You do need to know how to learn to use it correctly. But for this paper, stay away from it. All right, this is Professor Wheeler's really exciting Argument to Persuade lecture. Please contact me. I do apologize for the tardiness of this video upload. As you know, I've been dealing with a family crisis. So anyway, email me, text me, and I will talk to you all soon. See you later.